"You're not cleared to fly this UH-60. The duty officer's voice cut through the frozen air. Snow clung to his shoulders. The small woman just pushed her glasses up her nose, said nothing. Her hair was braided on both sides. Behind those thick frames, her eyes held something everyone had forgotten. Courage. 4 people are bleeding out, she said quietly. Then she climbed into the cockpit. Fort Nilsson, Alaska. Winter hit like a sledgehammer. Wind that could cut skin. Snow that hadn't stopped falling in weeks. Kara Dorsey was 29 years old. A backup medic. Small frame, brown hair always braided, thick round glasses that made her look like she belonged in a library, not a military base. Everyone saw Kara as the sweet girl who needed protecting. Nobody thought she could even lift a heavy first aid bag without help. She never argued back, just worked quietly. Every morning, she'd clear snow from the landing pad, check the heaters, pull night shifts in the emergency ward. An old sergeant used to tease her. "Hey, Kara, bet you could fly. In your dreams, right?" She'd just smile, clean her medical equipment, bow her head and walk away. But in her notebook, pages filled with helicopter engine diagrams, rotor mechanics, flight patterns. One time, Kara helped fix the starter cable on a flight simulator. Everyone was shocked. "How do you know this stuff?" Kara answered softly. "I used to study it, but I quit halfway through." Nobody asked why. They just assumed she wasn't good enough. The truth was buried in her personnel file, a file nobody bothered to read. Kara would sit alone in the mess hall. While others talked about their weekend plans, she'd sketch flight trajectories on napkins. The base commander once walked by her table, saw the drawings. "Interesting hobby," he said, not really paying attention. Kara folded the napkin. "Just helps me think, sir." What she didn't say was that every line, every angle, every calculation was perfect. Textbook precision that would make flight instructors weep. At night when the base was quiet, Kara would walk to the hangar, stand next to the UH-60 Black Hawks, run her hands along the fuselage like she was greeting an old friend. The mechanics thought it was cute. Little medic loves helicopters. They had no idea she knew every bolt, every wire, every system in those machines better than they did. Kara's bunkmate once asked, "Why don't you ever talk about your past?" Kara adjusted her glasses. "Some things are better left buried, but buried doesn't mean forgotten, and forgotten doesn't mean gone. Because when 4 people were dying in a snowstorm and every qualified pilot was stuck in weather delays, the quiet girl with braided hair would prove that some people don't need permission to save lives. They just need the chance." February 5th, Level 1 medical emergency. An ambulance had skidded off a forest road. 4 wounded soldiers trapped in a blizzard. Visibility, less than 10 meters. Ice covering the entire landing pad. Every qualified pilot was stuck at a training facility, delayed by the same storm that was killing people. Kara was cleaning the windows of a UH-60 in the maintenance hangar when she heard the radio chatter. She pulled off her gloves, ran to the operations room. "I can fly the helicopter." Lieutenant Shaw, the operations commander, looked her up and down, smiled like she'd just told a joke. "You don't have any flight clearance. You're a backup medic. Step aside." Kara didn't argue, just pushed her glasses up, unwrapped her scarf, walked quietly toward the helicopter. On her jacket chest, a small silver pin. Air Medical Wing, class of 2014. An older officer noticed. Wait, she was selected for tactical flight training, but she disappeared from the roster in 2016. Someone secretly pulled up old files, found a faded entry. Dorsey, K. Excellent simulation scores. Training discontinued after off-duty incident. What incident? The file was classified, but Kara was already at the helicopter, opening the cockpit, entering a code, KD-Civil Sky/17. The engine fired up. Rotors began spinning. Everyone went silent. She didn't finish training, but she remembers every access code. Lieutenant Shaw grabbed his radio. "Dorsey, shut down that aircraft immediately." Kara's voice came through the headset. Calm, professional. "Sir, if I don't fly now, those 4 soldiers will be dead in 20 minutes. You're not authorized. Authorization doesn't stop bleeding." Shaw looked around the room. His other pilots were hours away. The storm was getting worse. One of the medics spoke up. "Sir, I've worked with Kara for 6 months. She knows more about emergency medicine than our head physician." "Medicine isn't flying." "But flying without medicine is just transportation." Shaw watched through the window as Kara ran through pre-flight checks. Her movements were precise, efficient, like she'd done this 1,000 times. An old maintenance chief walked over. "Lieutenant, I've been fixing these birds for 15 years. That girl just performed a perfect cold weather startup sequence. In under 3 minutes. How is that possible?" "I don't know, but whoever taught her was military, high-level military." The helicopter was ready. Kara's voice on the radio again. "Operations, this is Medevac 1, requesting immediate departure clearance." Shaw hesitated. His career could end with one wrong decision, but 4 soldiers were dying. "Medevac 1, you are cleared for emergency departure." As the UH-60 lifted off into the blizzard, Shaw turned to his communications officer. "Pull everything on Dorsey, every file, every record. I want to know who she really is." 20 minutes later, the officer returned, face pale. "Sir, you need to see this." The classified file told a different story. Kara Dorsey hadn't quit flight training. She'd been the top student in her class. Perfect scores in combat flying, emergency medicine, and high-stress operations. Until the night she disobeyed a direct order. Flew an unauthorized rescue mission to save civilians trapped in a flood zone. She'd saved 17 people, including 3 children. And then she'd been quietly dismissed from the program. Officially for insubordination. Unofficially because she'd embarrassed superior officers who had refused to authorize the rescue. Shaw stared at the file. She was the best pilot they'd ever trained. "Yes, sir. And now she's flying into a Category 4 blizzard to save 4 people she's never met. Without clearance, without backup, without fear." The radio crackled. Kara's voice steady through the static. "Operations. I have visual on the crash site. Beginning descent." Kara piloted the UH-60 through snow falling like bullets. Wind screaming. The aircraft shaking like it might tear apart. She gripped the controls with bare hands. Heart rate steady. Breathing controlled. No radar. No ground control. Kara was using acoustic navigation and thermal tracking, techniques almost extinct in modern aviation. The wind slammed the helicopter sideways. She dropped her seat lower to reduce wind resistance, switched her left hand to rotor pitch control. In 5 minutes, she'd located the overturned ambulance buried in snow. Kara brought the aircraft down at a steep angle, a landing technique only taught in combat zones before 2000. She hit the door release, jumped into knee-deep snow. Her braids came loose. Glasses slipped down her nose, but her eyes never changed. Focused, calm, professional. She dropped her medical bag, started an IV blood transfusion from reserve packs, applied a tourniquet to a severed ankle, with the precision of someone who'd done battlefield medicine for years. She didn't ask for orders, didn't ask for permission, just said, "If we wait any longer, their hearts will stop." She loaded all 4 wounded soldiers. During the flight back, the helicopter lost thermal guidance. Kara switched to manual mode, using wind direction and heat signatures from the backup display. She flew just above the pine trees, so low that snow swirled up like ocean waves. When the helicopter touched down at base, the entire unit ran outside. Lieutenant Shaw couldn't speak. Kara stepped out, placed her glasses on the control panel, nodded once. "If you want to file charges, go ahead. But they're alive." That night, Shaw called his superior officer. "Colonel, I need the full story on Kara Dorsey." "That's classified." "4 soldiers are alive because of her. Unclassify it." The colonel was quiet for a long moment. Dorsey was the most gifted pilot we'd ever seen. Flew rescue missions in Afghanistan that nobody else would attempt. Saved over 100 lives in 18 months. What happened? She was ordered to abandon a civilian rescue during a Taliban attack. Told to prioritize military personnel only. Shaw waited. She disobeyed, flew into hostile territory, extracted 47 Afghan civilians, including 15 children, from a collapsed school. And her commanding officer wrote her up for insubordination, said she was emotionally compromised enough. unable to follow orders. She saved 47 people. She embarrassed a general who had already told the media that the civilians were acceptable losses. Shaw understood. So they buried her, reassigned her to medical support, stripped her flight status, made sure she'd never fly again. Except she just did. How? Like she never stopped. The next morning, Kara arrived for her regular shift. Same old jacket, hair braided as always. But this time, the younger soldier stepped aside when she walked past. A junior officer wrote on the operations board, "She doesn't need to prove anything. She flew when nobody else would." The 4 wounded soldiers had survived, full recovery. One of them, Sergeant Martinez, asked to meet Kara. "Ma'am, I heard you weren't even cleared to fly." Kara adjusted her glasses. "Clearance doesn't save lives. Actions do. Why did you risk it?" "Because if I didn't, who would?" Martinez handed her a piece of paper, a petition signed by his entire squad. "We're requesting that you be reinstated as a flight medic." Kara read it, folded it carefully. "I appreciate this, but I don't need official recognition to do what's right." "What if they punish you?" Kara smiled, the first real smile anyone had seen from her. "They already did, 8 years ago. I'm still here." That afternoon, Lieutenant Shaw received new orders from headquarters. Kara Dorsey was being transferred to the Elite Air Rescue Squadron. Full flight status restored. Commendation for extraordinary courage under impossible conditions. When Shaw told her, Kara just nodded. "Will you accept the transfer? Are there people who need saving?" "Always." "Then yes." She packed her few belongings, left her notebook on the desk for the next medic. On the last page, she'd written, "Don't judge people by the noise they make. Judge them by how they keep others alive, in silence." Kara never mentioned the rescue again. The next day, she wore her old jacket, braided her hair as usual. But now when she walked through the base, conversation stopped. A young officer posted a note on the bulletin board. "She doesn't need to prove herself. She already flew when nobody else dared." A new training classroom opened, named Dorsey Class, specializing in classical sensor flying techniques. In the corner of the duty room, they hung a photograph. Kara in the cockpit during the storm, hair loose, glasses crooked. But her smile was gentle. A cadet wrote in his journal, "I thought she was just a shy, sweet medic. Then she saved an entire squad, with bare hands and memory." One weekend morning, Kara didn't show up for duty. On her desk, the notebook filled with technical notes. On the last page, handwritten, "Don't judge others by the noise they make. Look at how they keep people alive, in silence." Tucked inside the back cover, a faded photograph. Kara at 19, laughing in the cockpit of her first UH-60. Her replacement found a letter addressed to whoever sits here next. Flying isn't about rank or clearance. It's about being willing to lift others up when they can't lift themselves. Some of the best pilots in the world will never have official recognition. They're too busy saving lives to fill out paperwork. Look for the quiet ones. They might be the only ones willing to fly into the storm. 6 months later, during a base inspection, a visiting general asked about the Dorsey class. Lieutenant Shaw explained the story. The general was quiet for a moment. "I knew a Kara Dorsey in Afghanistan. Best pilot I ever served with. Whatever happened to her?" "She's here, sir, teaching others to fly like her." "Where?" Shaw pointed to the sky. A UH-60 was practicing low-altitude maneuvers above the training field. "That's her? That's her." The general watched the helicopter perform flawless emergency landing sequences. "She flies like she's dancing with the wind." She says flying is just organized falling. The trick is knowing when to catch yourself. That evening, Kara returned from the training flight. The general was waiting. "I remember you, Dorsey." Kara saluted. "Sir, you haven't changed. Still flying like your life depends on it." "No, sir. Flying like other people's lives depend on it." The general smiled. "That's exactly what I mean." As he walked away, he turned back. "For what it's worth, that rescue in Kandahar, 47 civilians. They're all alive because you didn't follow orders." "Yes, sir. Good pilots follow orders. Great pilots know when to break them." Kara adjusted her glasses. "I just flew, sir. The rest is paperwork." Kara had no medals. No one gave speeches about her. No one waited for her to give orders. But when hope was fading in the snow, she stood up. She didn't shout, didn't demand recognition. She just did what was right, because if she didn't fly, nobody else would. There are people who live in silence. They don't stand out. But when needed, they're the ones who keep others alive. Look closer at the quiet ones. They might have flown farther than anyone imagines. People just stop believing they could take off again. The world is full of Karas, medics who can fly, teachers who can build, janitors who can lead. They're not waiting for permission. They're waiting for the moment when someone needs saving. And when that moment comes, they won't ask if they're qualified. They'll just ask, if I don't do this, who will? Sometimes the most extraordinary people are the ones nobody notices until the storm hits, and they're the only ones willing to fly into it.